it's now 2 o'clock, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the Pit Stop, your fortnightly midweek rest area to refuel your drive. I'm Karen Commins. I'm an audiobook narrator, and I'm the chief cartographer for narratorsroadmap.com, and I'm your host for Pit Stop. And with me in the co-pilot seat is my lovely friend and award-winning audiobook narrator, Anne Flosnik. She hosts the Narrator Uplift show here on Clubhouse. How are you today, Anne?
Great. So happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy you're here, too.
Thank you.
Every other Wednesday, audiobook narrators who do more than narrate are pulling into the pit stop, and they're sure to inspire you to follow your interest and use all of your talents and gifts. So I want to let you all know this conversation's being recorded, and you'll be able to re-listen or catch parts you missed. And feel free to comment in the chat and raise your hand in the app if you want to be part of the conversation, because we'd love to hear from you. Thanks again so much for joining us. I am super excited to talk today with audiobook narrator and podcast host Rich Miller. Rich has been a storyteller since he was a kid. When he was around 10, he started reading to his family after dinner every night. Later in life, he learned that people actually liked having stories acted out for them. He's been on stage in everything from Shakespeare to Damn Yankees to August Osage County, and he starred in the indie feature Acacia Flat. And now he's acting out stories in front of a microphone. Rich created the very popular podcast Audiobook Speakeasy so he could chat with narrators, coaches, engineers, and other industry professionals over drinks. He recently reached the 100th episode. Rich says he learned a lot from all the guests and discovered a lot of great cocktails, and we're going to talk more about that today. Rich, welcome to the Pit Stop. I'm just really excited to talk to you. It's high time somebody turned the table on you and asked you the questions.
Thanks, Karen. It's great to be here. Hi, Anne.
Well, reading about your history of telling stories, I had expected to see that you probably went to college in theater, and I was shocked to discover, no, you have a math degree.
I do, yeah.
What led to that?
You and I have a lot in common there, because if I remember correctly from when you were in the Speakeasy back on episode 26, way back when.
2018, that's right.
Yeah, you did quite a bit of coding in your lifetime, and I was the same. I spent a lot of time in high tech.
Yeah, so you did you go into this thinking, well, that's something I really love, or that's where the money is, or how did this come about?
So I was drawn into high tech when I was in college. I remember going down into the basement of the college library at some point, and that was where I think they had about 10, maybe a dozen computer terminals at the time. This is back in the 1980s. The IBM PC, I think, had just come out, and they had some dumb terminals connected to the college mainframe. And it was like one of those cartoon moments where I walked down and I saw these computer monitors, and it was like, light came down from heaven. So for whatever reason, I was really, really drawn to that, and it just was a really good fit for me, and it ended up working out for a career. Later on, I got less enthralled with a lot of aspects of high tech. And in the meantime, I had been sort of recruited to be in a stage play. I was never interested in theater when I was a kid.
No.
And I was recruited to be in a musical. And I was less interested in musicals than I was in stage plays. And I had such a good time that it ended up sparking this whole other career eventually. I mean, it took a long time, but I had so much fun that I kept at it.
Well, that's really interesting. And I'm keying on, pardon the pun, keying on the musical thing. So this was acting, and I'm assuming singing and not playing any sort of instrument, but were you singing also, or just acting?
Correct. Yeah. At the time, I was in a barbershop chorus, and the director came one night and he said, "Hey, there's this guy that's looking to get a barbershop, but it's kind of harmony, and so it would be similar. Is anybody interested?" And I was in a small chorus. We only had a dozen, maybe 15 members. And a few of us kind of looked around the room and kind of said, okay, shrugged our shoulders. And so we showed up to audition. And the director finally came over to us. It was a production of Bye Bye Birdie. And we were going to be Shriners singing backup to, I can't remember the name of the song now, but we were going to be Shriners and a couple of other bit parts at various places. And he said, "Oh, you're the quartet. Great. Go stand over there." So we ended up not auditioning and just being cast. And it was just so much fun doing the singing and a little bit of movement. I am not a dancer, but we had to do a little bit of movement and then, showing up in other scenes. And I just thought, this is great. And so that kind of spawned the acting career.
Now, have you always been in Tucson or in Arizona? Because I saw you worked for eBay, and I wondered, were you living in the Bay Area at that point? And so this musical, I'm wondering where this happened.
So I grew up in LA and then moved to the Bay Area in 1989, right before the big earthquake in October. It was,
Mm.
I think I moved in June or July, and lived in the Bay Area for 23 years. At the time that this happened, I was living in the Santa Cruz Mountains in a little town called Ben Lomond, and the production of Bye Bye Birdie went up in Scotts Valley, which is also over the other side of the hill towards Santa Cruz. So that's where that happened. And then shortly after that, I got married and we moved to San Jose. And so the rest of my theater was done in the South Bay area.
If I had just moved there and 3 months, 4 months later, there's this massive earthquake, I think I would have moved back.
Having grown up in LA, the earthquake didn't really freak me out that much. In fact, it didn't freak me out enough until later that day. I found out that the rapid transit was closed, part of the Bay Bridge had collapsed, and all of a sudden I thought, holy crap, this is serious. Because I've
Oh,
been through,
yeah.
I don't know, dozens or hundreds of earthquakes in my life. And that was when I realized, oh, this is a big deal. And, everything was closed for most of the rest of that week.
Yeah, I remember watching the World Series game when
Yep.
that happened. And then, of course, the TV cameras are immediately showing devastation
Yep.
everywhere. But just not only living through it, but the aftermath of it, it would be hard for me having just moved there. I know you said you've dealt with them before, but this was unlike most earthquakes, and it would just be hard, I think, to stay there.
Yeah, at that point I was already pretty committed, and so it wasn't really a problem. But yeah, that was a major event.
For sure.
And I've been on eBay since I want to say 95 or 96, somewhere in there.
Wow, that's early. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have to wonder, did you get any kind of discount?
No, no, no. I was actually a contractor a friend of mine. We worked at a startup together that ended up not going anywhere, and he started working at eBay through some company, and he said, "We're looking for somebody to do XYZ," and I said, "Well, yeah, okay, that sounds pretty good," since I was getting back into high tech at that point. And so he said, "Well, you have to go through this company." And I said, "Huh? Well, apparently that's the way they did a lot of hiring. Was they just said, we're going to work with this one company," and they placed a whole ton of people there. So it was kind of a secondary employment. But for the entire time I was with that consulting company, I was working for eBay. So essentially, I was, an eBay employee.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, all these firms do that, so they don't have to pay you the full benefits because, oh yeah,
Exactly.
you're just a contract employee. So you don't need health care, you don't need vacation time, you don't need sick time.
Yeah, and the consulting company did have benefits, but it was not nearly as I don't think that the benefits were nearly as beneficial as they would have been if it had been through the employer.
No, they planned it that way.
Yeah, yeah. My first foray into the gig economy, it was kind of a soft landing at that point. Being a narrator, not quite such a soft landing.
Well, so you did this musical, and then did you do more local theater from there? I mean, so I'm just wondering, how did you get from there to starting narration?
Yeah, so I did that. I did Bye Bye Birdie over in Scotts Valley, and then once we moved to San Jose, I auditioned for Damn Yankees, got in that, and then I started meeting all of the South Bay theater group. And as I'm sure you're aware, I'm sure this is true pretty much everywhere. Theater isn't a huge community. It's somewhat close knit depending on where you're living and depending on what level of theater you're at. So I started meeting all the people in the South Bay and had more opportunities. And then at some point, I don't remember which play it was, but I thought, well, maybe I should audition for a play instead of a musical. And I, whichever one it was, I did it and I loved it. And I thought, oh my God, yeah, I like this so much more than musicals. So I think the last musical I did was Jesus Christ Superstar, playing Caiaphas. And that was because I had met one of the people that was in the theater scene there. She was the musical director, and she really pushed hard for me to audition for this, and it ended up being a really good experience. But from that point on, and a little bit before that, I was really dedicated much more towards just stage plays. And so I took some acting classes, since I never had in the past, and I started learning more about what's involved and what you have to access, and all of the things that you learn as you get into acting. And then that sort of led towards, well, as long as I'm doing this, let's look into voice acting. So I did, got a demo, got an agent in San Francisco, booked quite a few non-union, smaller jobs. But what I didn't understand at the time was that once you do this, you are going into business for yourself. If you don't treat
Yeah.
it, if you don't treat it as a business, you're not going to get that much work. Sure, your agent will send you things, and you'll book a few things every once in a while, but you really can't make a living when you're just starting out if you're not put. Well, I shouldn't say you can't. A very small percentage of people luck out. They get great jobs early on, and it's kind of all the way up from there. For a lot of people, for me, it was not at all like that. It was much more, you're going to need to go out and get some work, and I didn't really understand that. So I just kept making a very small amount of money, and eventually had to go back into high tech. But as I was getting into voiceover, I thought, well, audiobooks, that's another avenue, and so I started volunteering for Reading for the Blind and Dyslexic, which is now Learning Ally, and a local organization in San Jose called Books Aloud. And I really felt like audiobooks were a good fit. I enjoyed it, and it felt I felt like I don't know, there was something about it that gave me a better feeling than when I was just doing the commercial stuff. That was fun too, but there was something about audiobooks where I felt like I could really immerse myself in this project. And so that stayed with me. After I moved to Tucson, then ACX was up right about the time, right before we moved. So learned about that. It took me a while to actually create a profile and get going. But once I did, once again, I felt like this just feels like a good fit to me. I'm not sure exactly why, but I feel like it works for me, and it ended up working out really well.
Well, I should say so, because you are now well established in it and you just keep going.
Yeah, and we all, I think, have those moments where it's like, well, geez, I don't have anything booked right now. I don't even know if I can keep doing this. And I still have those moments every once in a while. But fortunately, yeah, I've gotten to the point where I do feel much less uncomfortable when I don't have anything on the calendar more than a couple of weeks out.
Yeah, I think you've told me you've had that same problem, and Anne's been at it 20 years or more. That sometimes you feel like, where's the
Uh,
next one coming from?
It's true. For
Yeah.
me, I know it's never going to go away. That's just the way it is.
I suspect it will be the same for me. It's like at some point you just go, well, I'm not sure what's next, but
Yeah.
so I don't know that will ever go. It's kind of like they say, when you get into acting, you need to have a thick skin because you're going to audition for 100 things and book one, or national commercials, 1,000 or 10,000 auditions, and then you get one,
Or
or
book nothing.
right, exactly, yeah.
You're not guaranteed you'll book anything.
Exactly. There's no guarantee at all. And so they say, well, you have to have a thick skin. And I have certainly developed a thick skin, but it's not so thick that it doesn't affect me at all. I think that most of us, it still affects you no matter what. Well, I really wanted that book and they gave it to somebody else. And well, I'm not going to feel good about that for a while. It gets easier. It's just, I think that'll always be with me to at least some degree.
I think that's human.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told somebody the other day that because they were talking about developing a thick skin, and I said, if somebody would sell thick skins on eBay, they would make a fortune from the actors because we'd be lined up to buy it.
Yeah, this is one industry where that could definitely come in handy.
Well, so what started you on the path to decide you're going to have a podcast?
Well, it was 2017 or late 2016. I don't remember exactly, but I had just gotten into listening to a bunch of different podcasts, and I thought, oh, I feel like I need to learn more about this industry. I started on the commercial audiobook side in 2014. And so it had been a couple of years, 2, 3 years, and I felt like I need to know more about who's in this industry. I know that one of my problems when I got into voiceover the first time was not understanding this as a business. Okay, I get it's a business now. I need to drive this. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to. And I also, probably the biggest part was in the Facebook groups that I was in, people would talk about coaches and you need to get coaching. And I knew that that was true, but I wasn't sure who to go to. And you can get a personal recommendation, and that's great, especially if it's somebody that you really trust. But you're not always going to click with the person you're getting the recommendation clicks with. So I thought I'd really like to hear from these coaches and everybody in the industry, so that I know them better on a personal basis. And so I started looking for places where I could hear people talk. Pick whatever coach you want to think about, and think, well, I don't know if I would get along with that person or not. What do they sound like? What does it sound like their approach is to this kind of work? And I couldn't really find anything. The podcasts that I found about audiobooks were mostly about audiobook reviews. So whoever the host or hosts were would pick an audiobook and talk about the book and then talk about the narration, and that was kind of it. And I thought, that's not at all what I'm looking for. So I thought, well, I'm not finding what I'm looking for. I'm either looking in the wrong place or it's not out there. Maybe I'll just create it. So I went to APAC that year in 2017, and by that time I had kind of got some ideas in my head about what I was going to do, but I wasn't sure about everything. And so I ended up meeting Scott Brick and talking to him for a while, and said, look, I've got this idea. Would you be interested in, would you be maybe available to be interviewed? And he said, yeah, here's the thing though. I've gotten my stuff out there before about, origin story and whatnot. You're going to want to find some way to make it different, not just an interview. And so I thought, well, at the time I was kind of getting into craft cocktails and amateur mixology and all that. And I thought, what I really want is something comfortable, something where people feel like they're just sitting in on a conversation. They walked up to a couple of people sitting in a bar and they came up and now they're just sitting in and listening to the conversation. And so that's how I came up with the Audiobook Speakeasy idea of just sitting and having drinks and over drinks, having a chat about audiobooks.
I always thought, and then still do, think that's such a brilliant title and a way to marry both of those things together. And plus, when you think about a speakeasy, you couldn't just walk in there. You had to. I mean, I don't know. This is what I've seen in movies. I don't know.
Right, right.
But there was always the person behind the little slot. You'd had to
Yeah.
give them the password. So it's kind of like you know, inviting people to join the behind the scenes chat while people discuss things at a bar, and
Yeah.
that just made it all the cozier, I thought. And I
Yeah.
loved that theme and how you put those two things together.
Well, thank you. It was a great experience. I met so many great people, and just I had a great time, and I learned learned how to make a lot of new cocktails to me too. But mostly it was just meeting the people in the industry, and at the same time feeling good about being able to give back and not just having a private conversation, but sharing this with other people. And I have loved over the years hearing stories from people saying, I found my coach because you interviewed them on your podcast, and I really resonated with the conversation and with how this person was speaking about this stuff. And I had a coach actually come up to me at APAC the year after I had interviewed her saying, hey, you know what? Somebody just signed up with me because they heard me on your podcast. So thanks for that. And of course, that wasn't my intention, was to get them business. Nobody paid me or anything to get them business, but I love hearing that somebody felt comfortable enough to reach out to somebody and work with them because they had the opportunity to hear them talk about this work in a relaxed, comfortable setting.
It was brilliant. It was, and I hope you'll do it again. Selfishly, I really do.
I
You are
don't
the
have
king of it all. You really
I
are, Rich.
I don't have any plans at the moment. It's just that timing, when it comes to a podcast, a lot of people don't realize there's a lot of back end work that goes into that. You have to do the legwork of reaching out to people. Then you have to record it. Then you have to either edit it or pay somebody to edit it. And I wanted to keep control over it. So I've done it on my own the entire time. And so I figure it takes a good 6 to 8 hours for each 1 hour episode. So I also thought about doing a short form, but most of the podcasts I listen to are more the long form type, which are about an hour. And I just decided, I'm going to go with that. I know that some people actually don't listen to longer podcasts. They only want to listen to things that are 10 or 15 minutes. And that's fine. I understand that. But I decided, no, that doesn't really work for me.
What about coming over to Clubhouse and doing it there?
So there was actually right after Clubhouse probably quite a while after Clubhouse started, but right after I joined Clubhouse, I actually did one Sunday afternoon. I started a room that I called something like, I don't know, the Audiobook Speakeasy or something with that in the name of the room. And a couple of people did show up, but I just had a hard time devoting a specific time slot to it. And so I haven't yet, but it is still in the back of my mind as another way to keep that kind of, keep the vibe. Instead of having people to interview, just invite people in and actually have, group conversations about what's happening with them in the audiobook world. So that is definitely still a possibility. Not sure if or when that's going to happen.
Well, that's good. There is hope then, because I miss it. You built such community.
Yeah.
And it was a comfort. I mean, it really was. I loved it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you.
People in the chat are commenting on the same thing. John York said it's such a great show. Melissa Benson said such a wholly appealing podcast, from the theme music to Rich's congenial personality. I'm a forever fan. Plus, I love cocktails.
Yeah. So, and there were a lot of people. I always made it very clear that drinking was not required. I think probably a third of my guests were either having water or tea or something else, at least a quarter. And a lot of times that had to do with the fact that they were going to be working after the interview. And so I totally understand that. And I always tell people there are lots of very good reasons not to drink alcohol. So that's definitely not a requirement when you come into the Audiobook Speakeasy.
But, I know I was drinking Coke the day we talked because that's the strongest thing I drink. But You were talking about people finding their coach. It's not just finding the coach. I mean, I think we've all listened to your interviews with producers and find out what they like and how they work. And that is such invaluable information. And like I have a casting directory on Narrator's Roadmap, and I have companies and I have people. And then in the other resources, I list every place I can find where they're discussing things. And there's so many of these listings that say so and so was on this episode of Audiobook Speakeasy. I
Hmm.
mean, it's such a treasure trove of good information, and to help all of us research and be able to move forward in our careers. And so you may not have gotten that kind of feedback, but I want to tell you it's there.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
well, I appreciate that. I love hearing that. This is great. I hadn't even realized there was a chat until you said something in the chat.
Oh
And
yeah, there's a chat, Rich.
yeah, so like I said, it's been a while since I've been on Clubhouse, but this is great. I
Mhm.
love hearing that somebody else grew up in Santa Cruz and performed with South Bay Musical Theater. So I'm not sure who that is. When I was trying to think of South Bay, I think somebody may have changed their name. When I was performing Damn Yankees, it was with West Valley Light Opera, and I think either they changed their name or another group did, because I don't remember that name from when I was there. But anyway, so it's great. Thanks for thanks for keying me into the chat.
And that's one thing that I love, and I think you do too, Anne, about
Mhm.
Clubhouse, is because there is this interactive component to it.
Hmm. Yeah. So it does seem like a great platform. So maybe as I shift away from other things, I can pick up more here.
And
Oh, that's marvelous. And
yeah,
Rich, you're such a natural at it. Was there some job that you did or something that made you such an intelligent interviewer? I mean, really, you have it down to a science.
Boy, not that I can remember. I just I tried to, I think I only had one, maybe two episodes where I was not having a drink, and so I was always getting myself a little more comfortable in order to do a nice, pleasant interview.
Mhm.
I don't think of any of the jobs that I've ever had as being, so much of a something that would get me into that. But I like talking to people, so
Mhm.
I
Clearly. Yeah.
I've got the typical or not, maybe not typical, but common narrator personality type of introvert slash extrovert, and
Yeah.
so in
Yeah.
certain settings I feel really comfortable and happy being in a big group of people, and a lot of the time I just want to be like, nope, leave me alone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't understand anything about that.
I know I would.
Yeah,
Well,
I know it's not uncommon.
Mm-mm.
how long did it take you to, between having the idea of maybe I want to do a podcast, to actually implementing it and doing it? Do you remember?
It was well over 6 months. It may have been a full year. I don't remember when I started thinking about it exactly, but the first episode with Sean Pratt was in November of 2017, and I had been going over it in my head, the possibility of doing it, since at least the beginning of that year. And I had to learn all the technical stuff about where to register it and where to host it, and so I had to look into
Mm.
all the different hosting companies and all of that stuff, which has changed quite a bit since I started it. There are a lot more options available now. At some point after I started listening to a podcast called The Audacity to Podcast, which is all about podcasting. A little meta there, but it was great. The guy who ran it he would dig into the details of the best practices on this and the best practices on that, and how you which tags you use for this and that. But when I started, there was less than there is now. So there's quite a bit to setting it up, and because it was just kind of an idea, and I wasn't like super driven towards it, I allowed it to percolate for a long time. And then after talking to Scott, I thought, if Scott Brick could say, I actually was never able to get him on the podcast, but if Scott Brick is willing to talk to some unknown narrator and possibly be on a podcast that he's going to start, there has to be enough interest here. And so after that APAC, which is back when it was still in May, I started contacting people like Sean Pratt and other coaches and producers and whatnot. And then when I had a list of people where I figured, yeah, I should be able to sustain this for a little while, then I finally got down to doing the recording. So it was at least a good 8 or 10 months, maybe longer.
Wow.
I think podcast was the word of the year in 2006. I think that's when it got added to the dictionary, or at the end of 2005. And I remember this because I had wanted to do a podcast since then. And I haven't. I had ideas for it, and I've talked to several people, but ideas love speed, and if you don't start implementing it, then oftentimes it doesn't happen.
Yeah,
And it I had also in my youth dreamed of being a talk show host, and because of Pit Stop now on Clubhouse, but uh, this is where I'm going with this. This is actually now becoming a podcast because I saved the audio. You can download the audio from Clubhouse,
mm-hmm.
and I added some music on the front and back ends of it, and now it's living on Narrator's Roadmap on the Pit Stop page,
That's
and
great.
so it it has made a lot of the things that were challenging and that deterred me, and the things you're talking about. It has taken some of those out of the equation of not having to do all of the audio and processing everything myself. I can just roll with the audio that it gives me.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's
And
great.
yeah, and so it does seem like such a good fit for you if you take Speakeasy to some other kind of, take it to a new format, new platform,
Yeah.
and or if you had a different idea, maybe you want to change into a podcast now with all the cocktails that you've learned how to make.
No, but if I do something on Clubhouse, I will always be having a drink when I'm doing it.
Are you having a drink now? Is that what you're telling us?
No. I just mean as the
Oh,
host.
okay.
No, I've actually, I thought about making one because normally I only drink in the middle of the day if I go out to lunch. And that's only if I'm not working that afternoon. But I've actually gotten into a lot of different kinds of mocktails recently so that I could have a mocktail in the middle of the day at some point instead of just plain soda water or something like that. So I thought about making one and I just didn't get around to it before noon. So
Can you give us a fairly easy recipe for one of your mocktails, Rich?
well, I'm using specific products put out by a company called Lyres, Lyre apostrophe S. And I think they're in New Zealand, if I remember correctly. I don't know, but they do distribute in the US, and I've purchased now a whole bunch of their stuff. I think they have a really good non-alcoholic sparkling wine. And they have lots of different spirit alternatives. The spirits, I think, are the harder ones. They've also got quite a few liqueurs that are non-alcoholic, and those are really close. I every time I buy a new one, I do a taste test against the actual one. So they have one that's like Campari. So I'll take a taste of Campari and then I'll take a taste of theirs. And the mouthfeel is very different when it doesn't have alcohol in it. But if the flavor is similar, then you can build a really, pretty good drink out of it. And so I've made several Aperol spritzes that are non-alcoholic with their products, and it's a really good, refreshing mid-afternoon drink. A lot of the drinks that I drink are going to be much more refreshing once I'm not freezing all the time, because lately we've only been getting up to around 60 here. Now, I know some people are going to hear that and go, freezing. But living in Tucson, when it gets below 70, I'm putting a jacket on.
It's all relative.
So yeah, exactly. It's all relative, but Lyres puts out a lot of really good stuff. Their fake rum makes a really good daiquiri, and so yeah, that's what I've been experimenting with a lot lately is Lyres products.
And what's their gin like? Because I know you're a gin person, aren't you, Rich?
I am. I am.
Hmm.
Gin is almost always the spirit that I use for happy hour cocktails, whiskey for after dinner. But their gin is okay. It's not great, but it's okay. It makes a good gin and tonic, but
Oh.
it does. You just can't really make a martini without the alcohol. It just doesn't work. So it depends on the drink, but the gin is okay. I've actually got a bottle of their pink London Spirit right now, which also makes some really good drinks. I made a Virgin Tom Collins the other day with their pink gin that was great.
Mm. Let's try that out.
Yeah, they make good stuff.
Oh, that's a very good tip. And I
No,
do like gin. Yeah.
that's an interesting idea. Suzanne just commented. My friend Suzanne Barbetta just asked about a speakeasy mixology book based on the drinks that I created. That's an interesting idea. I will actually think about that. That would be something I could do kind of in spare time. That might be fun.
A great idea.
Yeah,
Well, and then you'd become an author.
Yeah, go for it.
exactly. Yeah.
And you would just add to all the things you're doing that aren't narrating, and that's what I love hearing about, is how people are splitting their time and bringing all their gifts to the surface.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that when you're in a creative enterprise, it is always a good idea to not have all your eggs in one basket. I am not doing that. On the other hand, I'm almost 60 and I'm having a hard time considering getting into anything new. Other people who are this age don't have any problem considering other things, and that's cool. For me personally, that would be I'm not really feeling good about getting into something new. But I think that earlier on in a career, because things change so quickly these days, I
Hmm.
think it's really important to kind of good advice for life. Just be a well-rounded person, and when it comes to work, be open to other possibilities that allow you to stay in some sort of creative endeavor.
That hits the nail on the head. I couldn't agree with you
Wonderful
more.
advice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because sometimes our gifts are just revealed to us, not kind of fully formed out of the egg, but they, become more revealed to us as time goes by within the creative framework, as you said.
sure, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, stay open and be a good, rounded human being. It's great
Yeah,
advice.
yeah. I just think that it's so easy to get sort of accidentally pigeonholed by yourself.
Yes.
And I think that, nobody's intending to go out there saying, well, I'm not going to do anything else, or, very few people, if any. But at the same time, if you're not actually, open to it on a regular basis, some things might just, you might miss them
Hmm.
in the journey, where if you'd actually, be open to it, you could see it and it might turn into, a secondary thing. Or even if it's just a hobby, something that would be interesting and make life more enjoyable. So I try to be open. I think it gets harder as you get older, but I try to be open to stuff like that.
Oh, well, clearly you are. And the whole, I think what we do as narrators, it just tends us to keep our heads down and our eyes down and our thoughts down, to speaking for myself anyway, to some degree. And it's only when, you get a chance to step back for a minute and look around and what's going on and where do you fit in, who am I and all the rest of it, that other avenues can become apparent. But it takes that getting the head back up and
Yep.
join the human race for a minute to see, what are the things?
Yeah. Especially with the synthetic voice thing that's happening now,
Mhm.
that I personally am not overly concerned about that. I'm kind of in the minority view. I realize that, but I think that there are going to be major challenges that for it to go from kind of the niche product that it is now, which is a very good niche product. It's getting better and
Mhm.
better. I get that.
Yeah.
And having the tech background, I understand that technology moves quickly and it could get to that point. I tend to have a view that it's going to take quite a while for that. For somebody at my stage in life, I don't see it as a huge problem. I do see it as something that everybody should keep on their radar and
Mhm.
keep learning about the advances and what's happening in that part of the industry. And because of that, be really open to diversifying and make sure that you have other things that you can do if, worst case scenario happens with synthetic voices.
Right, right. And it's not the first big thing that came along, in the industry, because when I started, there weren't computers. So, and we survived and we just keep on. So I
Hmm.
tend to be optimistic about it all, that there'll still be a place for us, and if not the
Hmm.
forefront place. Um,
And when you
yeah,
started, you were always going to a studio.
yeah,
It,
yeah.
and so the at-home revolution was
Oh,
sometime after that. So,
yes, yeah. And then it's how quickly you adopt to things. And no, I've grown an awful lot, but you have to grow as the years go by. But I'm just saying that there have been other big changes that shook up the whole way that audiobooks were delivered, and
Hmm.
what I had to do as a narrator, or anybody had to do as a narrator. And you just, but it all works out. It just
Yeah.
does. You have to believe that.
That was true when I started in voiceover as well. I started in the early 2000s, and at the
Mm,
time, home studios were not common. They were
no.
starting there people were starting to record at home more, but it was not common to have an actual home studio like a Studio Bricks or Home
Mm,
Built or whatever it is. Most people who were recording at home like I was were recording in a closet, and a lot of people still are, and there's nothing wrong
mm,
with that if it
mm.
if
yeah,
you
I
get.
started in a closet.
I
Yeah,
did too.
if you have a good location, a closet might be the perfect solution because you don't have to build something and you get a great sound. So
Hmm.
that's great. But at the time, actual home studios were really just only for the Don LaFontaines of the world. It
Yeah.
was really not much of a thing. And very quickly, within I would say the first 2 or 3 years that I had gotten into voiceover, that started to change rapidly. And by 5 years later, it was really semi-common for people who were getting into voice acting to do that. And the people who weren't able to adapt and had to keep recording in studios were finding it slightly more difficult. Of course, the more established you are, the less that matters, but they were finding it a little bit more difficult to keep up. And so you have to be able to not not foretell what's going to happen, but keep your finger on the pulse and be
Mhm.
willing to adapt and change and learn new things as things change.
It's definitely great advice for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know you said that you were doing all the editing of your podcast. So, and you were having to hunt down the people and do all the scheduling. So, it sounds like you don't have or didn't have any help since I know you've ended the speakeasy. So, if was it just you, or did you actually have a VA in there somewhere, or some sort of physical help with editing?
Nope, it was just me. I will say that I had a lot of support from my wife, just understanding that I was doing all these different things, or a few different things. I don't want to make it sound like I was all over the place, but she was very supportive. But it was pretty much all me, just doing all the podcast stuff. I hear about assistance, and I think, wow, that sounds great, but for where I'm at and for the amount of work that I do, so far I haven't had the need for that. I could totally see if I was working like I don't know 50% more than I am or doing other things, or if I had other non work related stuff like family members, kids, they're everybody is in a different situation, and I'm in a situation that's fairly relaxed in that sense. I don't have all these other things going on, but I could definitely see why having an assistant would be really helpful, depending on what you're dealing with.
Well, I have a question. I call this the pit stop hot seat. I may ask you more than one question, but one of the favorite questions I've asked people is what is if you went into the witness protection plan, what identity would you like to assume?
Ooh, uh, It's funny. I think about the stories that I've heard of people who have done that, being a organized crime drama aficionado, Sopranos fan, stuff like that. Um, I I have to say, because and I've also thought, if it wasn't for the fact that I would have to deal with the public, I would love to open a restaurant. And so I have to say, given my experience in the past 5 years, learning a lot more about cocktails, I would open a bar. I would love to be a bar owner and an occasional bartender.
Hmm.
I mean, you'd still have to deal with the employees, though, even if you're not there on a daily basis.
Yes, and that's another negative when it comes to owning a business.
And then, of course, there'd be all your suppliers you'd have to deal with. So you'd be dealing with a lot of people pretty quickly.
Yeah, suppliers I think I could deal with better than employees and the public. But yeah, I would probably do that.
And another favorite question I have is, which fictional character do you wish was real and why?
Oof.
Told you you'd be in the hot seat.
Yeah. Boy. Fictional character. I'd probably say Gandalf. Somebody who could impart some wisdom to me on occasional bases. That would be fun.
Well, that's a good choice. It sounds like you and he, excuse me, you and he have already been communing, though, because you've been imparting some wonderful pearls of wisdom here today.
Well, I do my best. I'm no wizard, though. I'll tell you that.
And we're coming up on the top of the hour, and I want to be sure anybody in the audience has a chance to talk or ask questions. I did see Abigail Reno has a question for you. Maybe she wants to come to the microphone and ask it.
Yeah, I saw that. That's great.
Abigail, do you want to come to the mic, or do you want us to just have him read your question and answer it? And anyone else is welcome to come to the mic as well.
Sure, yeah.
While we are
Happy to take questions. I don't know if I'll have any answers, but
I always, when I worked in IT, and even now, sometimes I still say, I, go ahead and ask me your question. And if I don't know, I'll be glad to make up something.
usually I leave it at, if I don't know, I'm going to tell you. I don't know.
Oh, she says, I'm not sure how to turn my microphone on in Clubhouse. If you raise your hand, or I think I can just invite you to speak.
I
I
actually,
think I have that power.
the one time that I ran a room, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And so I learned that there are a lot of things that you can do when you're actually in charge of the room.
I have sent the microphone to Abigail, and here she is. And if you'll just tap your microphone in the bottom right corner.
Oh,
there you go.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
you sound great.
Oh, yay. It's my first time speaking on Clubhouse.
Well,
I didn't know how to do that.
It's a banner day.
Very cool. I'm walking my dog at the moment, so that's why I'm a little out of breath. Anyway, yeah, I was just curious if you had ever made a martini with sauerkraut juice instead of olive juice. I've been wanting to try that. I haven't done it yet.
I have not. That's a great idea, because I do love sauerkraut. What I have done is had a martini. So I should also say, I am not a fan, even though I love olives, I am not a fan of a dirty martini. I think that the amount of olive that you get from the olive that you put in it is plenty for my taste.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a restaurant about a mile and a half from me that has a homemade. It's a I don't remember what they call it now, but it's like the house martini, and it is made with pickle juice and a piece of pickle as a garnish instead of an olive or a twist. And I love it. It's great. So sauerkraut juice, that sounds like a really interesting idea. I also love a Gibson with a cocktail onion instead of an olive.
Ooh.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
I've heard of the pickle juice thing. I haven't tried that yet either.
yeah, no, it's really good. So sauerkraut, that's an interesting idea.
Also, somebody, I commented Gandalf was the first person who popped into my head, and somebody commented, really? And yes, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings nerd.
Yeah, I've read the series 6 or 8 or 10 times, and the books that I like more, like Fellowship, more than. But yeah, that's the first person that came to mind. I'll have to think about that. That's a good question.
Is Gandalf really a person? I forgive me, I've never read Lord of the Rings, so
Oh, no kidding.
is Gandalf really a person, or
He's a wizard.
okay? Oh, well, that explains it.
Yeah,
He's still a person. He's still a person.
yeah.
Okay, well, I didn't know if like he's an elf or he's a hobbit or he's some other kind of entity other
He's a
than
wizard,
person.
humanoid wizard.
Yeah, I think
Well,
he
this is good
counts.
to know. You never know when you'll be tested on this kind of thing.
Exactly. Anyway, I don't want to overstay my time talking. I could talk about Lord of the Rings forever.
Well, we're glad you came and we're glad you came to the microphone, and
Yeah.
it was
Thank
your first
you.
time on Clubhouse, but hopefully speaking on Clubhouse, but hopefully it won't be your last.
Yeah, I'm trying to tune in more.
Yeah, there's a
It's
lot
been
of good conversations happening.
exactly. Yeah, a lot of wealth of knowledge. So thank you guys so much.
Cool. Is there anyone else who would like to come up to the mic while we still have Rich?
Just raise your hands.
Like I said, not sure if I can answer, but
Well, that's okay. Like I always said, you can make up something and nobody will know the difference. So,
they will if it's bad advice and they take it.
well, there are a lot of people dispensing bad advice, but you're not one of them.
There are. I always tell people, be careful what you pay attention to out there.
So, what if somebody's sitting out there and they're thinking, well, maybe there's something I'd like to do. Maybe not a podcast, maybe something else. Do you have advice for them of people who want to expand their horizon beyond narration? What would you say to that kind of person?
I would say if first just do some personal brainstorming and think, if you're really not sure what you want to do. So if you don't know that you want to do a podcast, but you want to do something else, just brainstorm and be crazy. Come up with crazy ideas. Well, I want to talk to somebody about audiobooks, but I don't like the podcast format. So come up with, everything you can think of. Give a talk at a local library. Give a talk on a street corner. Go into a bar once a week and just pick somebody at random and see if they'll listen to you. I mean, think about crazy things, and then after you think about a bunch of crazy things, narrow it down and say, yeah, that's unrealistic. Nobody's going to want to listen to that. Nobody's going to want to participate in that, whatever it is. But allow yourself the ability to just think of anything, then narrow it down. And once you have a couple of good ideas, then I'm a big fan of doing a substantial amount of research before you actually start something. I think that, it can work to where you go into something going, well, I don't know, I guess I can do this. And you just start. I think that can work. And I think that for some people, it'll work better than for other people. That is not my approach. My approach is almost too far in the other direction, where I can get into analysis paralysis and basically just think about it forever and never end up coming up with a way to do it. But I'm a big fan of doing research and finding out who else is doing this kind of thing. How are they doing it? If I was going to start doing that thing, whatever it is, how would I do the first steps? Would I have to, like for a podcast, what do you have to do? Well, you have to register the podcast. After you register it, you have to put specific tags in place so that the various different podcast platforms and providers can actually pull it in and distribute it. And so I'm a big fan of doing quite a bit of that, so that once you actually get going, you already have enough knowledge to where when you run into a roadblock, you know where to go to get the answer to how to fix it, even if you don't know how to fix it right away. So that's the way I think is a good way to go about it, is, give yourself a lot of freedom and then be realistic, pull back a little, and then do a lot of research.
That sounds great. We have Rebecca Lee is down here, and I don't know how to bring her up, Karen.
Oh.
She'd like to come up and ask Rich a question. Do you see her down there at the bottom?
Yes, let's see. She disappeared from the list, so let's find her in the actual audience. There she is. And then invite her to speak. So Rebecca should be coming to the mic.
Yeah.
I feel like we should be playing some sort of music or something while this happens. That maybe something happened. I sent an invite to Rebecca, so
Oh, here's somebody else.
she's not getting the invite.
I don't know.
Well, that's not right.
No, Linda Graves. Let's see if we can. Hi, Linda. All right, maybe I'm doing something wrong because I keep. Oh, here we go. There we go. Hi, Linda. And if you can just oh, we've got them both. Two ladies. Wonderful.
Great.
So if one of you or both of you can just unmute yourselves, and then we can see what you
let's
have to
go
say.
with Rebecca first, because and there you go, and then Linda will get to you in a minute.
Sounds good.
Hi. I don't have a question. Just wanted to say thanks, Rich, for being a community leader and having the podcast. And a couple of years ago, well, the last in-person APAC, you had a big like a lunch gathering at
Oh
New
yeah.
York, and that was kind of cool because I got there and I'm like, I don't know anyone, and then I heard your voice. I recognized your voice. I'm like, it's this guy over here.
Yeah,
So,
no, that was so much fun. And I didn't know if, anybody would want to come, or if I'd have to try to find some place that could accommodate 100 people. I really didn't know. And that worked out.
It was like the perfect number that showed up.
It worked out really, really well. Had a big table, but not so big that you couldn't talk to people. Yeah, that was great. So thank you for the kind words. I'm really glad that I was able to provide something that was helpful to people. I really am.
Awesome. That's it.
I have 3 questions and then I'll just go away. But my first question is, what is the most surprising or shocking thing that happened in an interview? And 2, what is the strangest cocktail someone showed up with that you weren't expecting? And 3, I know you make up your own cocktails, so when is your cocktail book going to be published?
Those are all great questions.
Boy, another nod to that cocktail book.
People want that book, Rich, now.
Yeah, that's a very interesting idea. I got to think about that. So let's see. The first question was, what's the strangest thing that I learned? So I've had a couple of guests who talked about personal tragedies that they had in their life that I was unaware of. And I mean, I'm you can pick anybody in the world and go, I'm sure that there have been things that happened in their life that I am unaware of. There are lots of things that happens in everybody's life, right? But when you're talking to somebody for an interview and all of a sudden you find out about the fact that their husband died very young, or they came down with, or a family member came down with an very difficult to diagnose debilitating disease, or things like that, it's a bit of a surprise. And I like to think that I went with those surprises well, but there have been quite a few times where somebody said something about their background or what they did beforehand, or that they had some, tragedy happen where I was kind of, momentarily shocked. And so I'm not sure I want to go into any specific ones, but that would be the category of things that I found the most surprising as I was doing the podcast. The strangest drink that anybody brought, I can't think of one. I think that I've made some pretty strange ones. I know that Tanya Eby, I think it was, said something on, I think it was on Twitter, about having something that tasted like a birthday cake. And I thought, hey, that sounds like a great idea. So I tried to come up, I think I called it a birthday cake martini, and I used, I don't even remember, some kind of flavored vodka, and it was not good. I just ended up being quite unhappy with my concoction at that point. But in terms of what other people drank, I don't remember. I was a little surprised when Julia Whalen came in with a Last Word, which is one of my favorite gin cocktails. And I thought, this is great. Somebody who knows, more than just the basics, martini and gin and tonic, and came in with a Last Word. So it was always fun when somebody would come in with kind of a classic cocktail. And PJ Oakland with his Three Bitters Manhattan, which I typically make a Manhattan with more than just aromatic bitters at this point.
Fascinating. Thank you.
In terms of the book, I don't know. Now that bug has been planted in my ear, I'll have to think about that. I'll do some research on it.
Well, I can't wait to get it. So go for it.
All right.
Yeah, it sounds like all of your fans from the podcast would line up to buy it, and
Yeah.
and there are plenty of them.
Yeah. No, that's a great idea.
We have reached 3:00, and I just want to put out a last call for anyone else who might want to say hi to Rich or have a question.
Last call. Great way to end an episode like this.
I thought you of all people would probably appreciate that. Well, I don't see anyone with raised hands or questions in the chat. So I guess it's time for everybody to get the show back on the road, and we'll just conclude today's pit stop. The recording is going to be available on Clubhouse later today, and in the near future, I'll post it with a transcript on Narrator's Roadmap. I hope you'll all take another road trip with us in 2 weeks on March 15th, when we'll be speaking with Sarah Puckett. She's a narrator, and she's also the owner of Pink Flamingo Productions. Anne, do you want to talk about next week's Narrator Uplift show?
Oh, but first of all, maybe mention, is it letting any cats out of bags? It can't be. Sarah's conference?
No, it's not. It's not letting cats out of the bag at all.
Well, maybe we could mention that. Go on.
Well,
I keep going. Okay. Well, I don't know all the details, but she's having a virtual conference, and it's 2 days, and I don't quote me on what the hours are, but if you look it up online, you'll find out. 2 days, March the 29th and 30th, and it's a very nominal cost, and you can either be there in person for the whole or part of the 2 days, or just receive the recorded versions of it.
Right, and this is linked on her site, Pink Flamingo Productions, which I'll drop in the chat.
Yeah.
Right now. Yeah, we'll be talking with her about that on the next pit stop.
Right. And next Thursday, March the 9th, on my show, The Narrator Uplift, we will be interviewing, Karen and I will be interviewing Don Barnes, the audio engineering guru. So that'll be good. And so think of your questions, and we will have the man himself.
And you've now created your own club on Clubhouse.
Yes, called Narrator Uplift, which is the same as the name of the room was. So please join, and we'll keep you posted.
Yeah, it'd be so much easier to find your show and be able to get reminders about it.
Right.
So that's what's coming up, and in the meantime, I hope you all find joy in every journey and live the life of your dreams. Thanks again to Rich Miller for this delightful conversation. And
thank
to my
you.
friend.
This was great. Thank you. I really appreciate being on.
Well, we so appreciate having you, and we'll be looking for that book.
Yeah. And your Clubhouse club room.
That's right.
Yes, Rich.
I'll definitely think about that too.
No pressure. or
Yeah,
anything.
yeah. Let that bug fly around your ear a little bit longer.
I will, yeah.
I'm determined.
And thank you, Anne, for your excellent observations and support as always. And thank you all to the audience for joining us today, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. We'll see you soon.